Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Batshit Crazy. Today, we're taking you on a journey. We're doing a retrospective of the Clone Wars, the animated series. The show was an animated series set between the events of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The series aired on Cartoon Network for 5 seasons from 2008 to 2013, while an abridged 6th season was released through Netflix in 2014. It was mainly helmed by Dave Filoni and crew. And yes, we just wanted to, at first, we were going to do this whole series in one go, but we decided we could talk about just season 1 for easily an hour. So we're going to do this in parts. So each week we're going to give you the next season, our thoughts, break down a little bit. We're not going to go episode to episode. That's a little bit too much. Not all of this show was great, but we're going to hit on the more important storylines and characters that we found interesting, and why this show really shapes all of Star Wars. And if you have not watched it yet, I highly recommend you do. Just go watch it, then come back here. Don't want to spoil you. But yeah, it's worth watching. It's not a little kid show like it has been portrayed by some. It's great. So I will turn it over to Kyle and you can get us started.
Thanks, Zach.
You're
So
welcome.
nice of you.
I know.
Turn it over. Look at us. Not speaking over each other. We're taking turns. It's like submarine warfare.
We started good. Doesn't mean it'll end like that.
It doesn't need to. No, you said it really well. This show impacts Star Wars more than any other movie possibly could. George Lucas first introduced us to, as you said, that samurai Jack style animation. I remember when they came out, they were like little 5-minute episodes, and all they were supposed to do was bridge the gap between episode 2 and episode 3. And primarily, it wanted us to meet General Grievous, I think, and to be introduced to what a powerhouse he was. And so I think it was 2008 when this new styled uh, Clone Wars movie launched
Mm-hmm.
and introduced us to uh, the Padawan of the Chosen One. And it was really cool to get that introduction. But it did start kind of childish, kind of kiddish, kind of why am I going to waste my time watching this Star Wars cartoon? This is clearly directed towards children. And you get that vibe kind of through season 1, and it doesn't really take over as a show that you realize, oh, this may have started as a kid's show, but it's definitely not anymore until later seasons. But you do get a lot of really mature themes throughout this first season. It's not all just a kid's show. So yeah, that's really great. This first season lays the groundwork for a lot of cool themes that happen, and it sees Asajj Ventress, Count Dooku's Sith assassin, come back. She's pulled over from that first animation run. You get to see the Jedi, specifically Plo Koon, interact with his soldiers, and where the clones were always portrayed as cannon fodder, faceless army that can be wiped out on screen to avoid a higher rating at the theater. You get to see the Jedi develop their relationship with their soldiers, and you get to see that relationship evolve into something really worth talking about, which impacts obviously Order 66 all the more. You get crazy things. You get for every heartfelt moment between Anakin and Padme or Obi-Wan and Cody, you get crazy childish things like an adventure with Jar Jar and C-3PO. And so, yeah, this show really sets up a lot of foundational work for the mythos of Star Wars, everything in the Skywalker saga. It even touches, and we'll get into that later with the later seasons in another episode, but it touches a little bit into the Old Republic. And I think Clone Wars is credited with being what brought Darth Bane over from Legends into canon officially. And so a lot of those cool themes, it's their way of kinda pulling on it. So, yeah, you absolutely should not shy away from Clone Wars.
Um, and I would say out of all the seasons of this show, um, this is probably the weakest one, right? Season one.
Uh,
It's
yep.
the most childlike of the seasons. The show was still working on its identity. It One episode you could have one that seemed like it was made for 8-year olds, and then the next episode somebody that dies gruesome death, and it's like, what is this show? And it would do that yo-yo for a little bit until I would say seasons 2, 3. It starts to really find its footing and does less of that. And it always has some to some degree, but I think with especially with the droids, it was kind of a nice comic relief because they're obviously just fodder and they're not going to put up any actual resistance. So I think the move to make them kind of more humorous was a good choice instead of just lifeless droids get slashed down anyway, regardless. So um, what would I think the order of this as far as things happening? Yoda, I think, has a mission early on that I think is one of the good foundational parts of this show that give it depth to everything else in Star Wars, where you see him more of the Grand Master in the original movies instead of the prequel Yoda, which he's a little more, I'm not sure what the term would be, but he's a little off. And the original Yoda seemed more of a more aloof, but whatever you have is transparent in the void.
Let's talk about Yoda. I think it's great that you're starting with Yoda. I'm fairly certain Yoda takes center stage on that first episode, right here after the Clone Wars movie that happened. Yoda, the Clone Wars, it's so expansive, and you don't get much, from the original trilogy. You get Luke, he's talking to Obi-Wan in this hut, and he's like, "You fought in the Clone Wars?" "Oh, my dad was in the Clone," but you never get it's never elaborated on what the Clone Wars really, really were. And that first season, the tone is slightly different from the seasons that followed as they kind of shifted focus more on characters. And but this first episode, this first Yoda arc, is really centered around the Republic's need to bring in more systems into the fold, and the Separatists need to bring more systems into the fold. And so this episode that you're talking about, both the Republic and the Separatists send an envoy. I think it's the is it the Watto's people, right? It's those
Mhm.
people, the flying, I'm Ardarian. Mind tricks don't work on me, only money. Uh so you get envoys from Republic and Separatists, and the episode is basically uh Asajj Ventress and Yoda trying to convince the people of this planet why they should or shouldn't join either faction. And there's this really cool moment where Asajj thinks that she's gonna pull one over on Yoda. Doesn't he just like take her lightsaber from her, just like
Yep.
nonchalantly? He's
Yeah.
like, "Whoa,
It's
whoa,
great.
whoa, 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 calm
he
down just
the
a little
the
bit.
best part
She's
is he
she's
gives them
all
back
ready
to
for a fight." And he's
he
just
gives
like,
them back to her.
"No,
He's like, yeah, he takes them and then he goes, here, you can have them.
here, you can have these back."
And she's
But
just like,
now that we've established I'm met me have you not. I am Yoda.
go home, you
No,
will.
it's a great moment. Go home, you will. And no, it's really cool because you get to see I think there's an ambush set up later, and you get to see Yoda being compassionate towards his clone envoy, and They deal with a couple things. You get to see Yoda in action, and it's a good opening for the full picture that we'll get when the series is done. Yeah, we open up on Yoda and just this basic concept of these two factions are bidding for who can bring this person into the war on their side. I think that's one of the clever things that this show does is it just fills in that background for the Star Wars mythos. You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yeah, I think the only thing I have left to add on that is it's a small moment, but it does set up a lot for this show and especially um, Bad Batch and things of that nature, where Yoda tells one of the clones that he is more than just a clone, something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but during the battle, he tells him he's more than just a number kind of thing, and you are a person kind of deal, which I think was very minor conversation in that episode, but it does set up for the whole rest of the show and other ones where they do have personalities, and you start seeing that really span. But um, from there, we can go to which is this hurts me to say because she's my girl. Ahsoka Tano is terrible in this season. I forgot just how bad her character was initially. It was
Yep.
oh boy, was it bad. And I don't know if this was intentional or if they were just going with a teenage girl stereotypical trope, if that was the deal and they realized how bad it was and decided to about face later in this, which we'll get to later in this season, when they did fix her character. I don't know if this was a plan all along, if they were trying to make everybody hate her and go, this girl's annoying, or if this was something they went like halfway through the season, they're like, oh man, yikes, we need to do something here. So I don't know what the how that came about, the change, but the change that does happen later really changes the whole outlook for a character moving forward. And um, yeah, it's that's I think
Uh,
later on in season one.
Ahsoka is absolutely, she is I don't wanna say that she is the driving point of this series, but she is the biggest contribution from this series. And
Mhm.
that says a lot, considering all the different elements they add. You know, season 1 introduces a lot of cool characters. We get Hondo, we get Cad Bane, you know, we get introduced to, Jabba the Hutt's nephew or Zero or whoever, and it really there's a lot of world building that goes into it, but, I think it was I don't remember the actress that plays Ahsoka in cartoon, but I remember seeing an interview with her, a retrospective, where she was talking about the first season and all the hate that Ahsoka got because she was so whiny. And you're like, why is that? Why is this, 11-year-old Jedi Padawan running around in a tube top during the, a war? Sort of, there was all this controversy. People didn't like the character at first because they're like, the chosen one never had a Padawan. What is this nonsense? You know, Anakin's barely 20 years old. How is he raising some kid already? Um, but she was definitely one of the breakaway characters from it. And that's just another good example of how the show evolves over time is it starts kind of iffy and grows into something absolutely beloved and timeless. I know I enjoy watching it whenever kids do too. Um, but talking about going back just a little bit to you were talking about Yoda and how he was telling his clones that they're not just numbers. That's a theme that they set up heavily, heavily in this first season, because the next story arc is all about the separatist warship, the Malevolence, and it gets a 3-episode arc, and this ship, this mega warship, is basically, a doomsday weapon. It's got a huge EMP cannon on it. It can take out Republic cruisers, and one of the cruisers it does take out is, Jedi Master, General Plo Koon, his attack fleet, and, we meet Plo Koon in earnest. We get to hear his voice for the first time, and, he gets stranded in space with just a couple survivors from the 104th Battalion, and, the clones talk to him, and they're saying, "Just leave us, sir. Just leave us behind. We're clones. We're supposed to be expendable." And Flo is like, "No, not to me. You're not expendable to me. I'm a Jedi Master, just like Yoda the episode before, all life is precious. Even your life, you clone trooper you, CT blah 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 blah. Your new name is Wolf.
Yeah. Um,
So what did you think of that episode arc with the malevolence? What do you think of the idea of doomsday ships in Star Wars?
I am personally kind of over them, to be honest. That arc in particular, though, wasn't terrible. I don't think it was overly memorable. It had some bad parts. The R3 storyline, I think, was in that, wasn't it? Was it not? The whole
Uh, that
confiscate the
that
droid
comes at the
thing.
tail that comes at the tail end of it, yeah.
That was just dumb. Since we're kind of giving into this now, I guess we can just segue right to him. Grievous in this season in particular wasn't, I don't think he was overly memorable. There was some moments in there, but he was kind of, I don't know, not much different than he was in the movies, to be honest, which I was kind of hoping for maybe more out of him. But you get more later in later seasons, but I think it was season 2 specifically where he has a little bit more.
It's not Is this not the season though where I think it's Kit Fitzdu and his Padawan travel to Grievous's lair and you learn his background kind of? Don't you
Kind of,
get the setup
yeah. You get,
for
I
Grievous in
think,
this?
it's like the setup for it. Yeah, you get a little bit of the emotion when Kit kills his buddy, and that's kind of the most you get out of him. But I think the reveal comes in season 2, possibly, that he gets more into his past. He's kind of more just generic Grievous here, which is fine. I'm fine with more Grievous, but um, Kit really did disarm him, from what I remember.
So let's just try to get organized. Let's do a brief synopsis of just what happens in this season because we're talking about different things in this season like we have it in front of us and for those that haven't joined us and probably never seen the show, this is kind of a lowdown of what happens this season. Asajj Ventress brought into full canon. Interaction with Yoda, she gets sent packing to school. We meet Plo Koon. We find out that the Separatists do some sneaky stuff. We knew that. They're bad guys, but, they're making doomsday weapons at the same time that the Republic forces are trying to deliver food to helpless planets. Um, the clones we meet some key members of the 501st Legion this season. Rex and Cody, they discover Five and Echo, who would go on to be a pivotal character in the Citadel, uh, which happens, I think, season 4 or 5. But he something happens to his character, and we don't see him again until Bad Batch. But we meet Hardcase and we meet Heavy and we get introduced to the commando droid. That's season one's the first time we get to meet those guys. R2, we get to watch R2 get into a droid fight with R3, which is as ridiculous as it sounds,
Probably one of his
and
cooler moments.
so great. Uh, Padme finds herself in trouble. She gets saved by C3PO and Jar Jar Binks. We visit Grievous's lair. We meet Hondo, the pirate king. He manages to capture Count Dooku, and he manages to capture Obi-Wan and Anakin, all 3 at the same time, again, rescued
Can't wait
by
to talk
Jar
about
Jar.
that.
Uh,
It's one of my favorite
we
things.
get Anakin. There's an episode where Anakin gets severely injured while they're helping on a relief mission, and Ahsoka kind of has to pick up the reins and do things on her own while Obi-Wan does his thing. Um, bioweapon. The Separatists also developed a bioweapon on Naboo, and Padme and Ahsoka get exposed to that. And then Ryloth, the home of the Twi'leks, we get introduced to a very young you'd know her later in Rebels as Hera Syndulla, and so we get
Right.
introduced to that character and her dad and the role her family played in the Clone Wars. Before the rise of the Empire, and then the cherry on the cake at the end, we get introduced to Cad Bane, who
Hmm.
I believe it's this season where he holds the Senate hostage, and Anakin has to do some
Yep.
James Bond level type stuff to get them all out. And so, yeah, this season, I mean, it's It is the weakest season of the series, but it comes out swinging. You get introduced to new characters, background for some mysterious characters. Plo Koon, I know he was a fan favorite, but in the movies, all he did was sit in a chair, and so you really get to meet some of these. So I guess with the whole scope of the season now in front of us, what parts do you want to talk about?
So we went through the malevolence. That's just that was kind of cut and paste. I think the first real interesting storyline is the pirate escape with Dooku, Obi-Wan, and Anakin all in the same prison cell at the same time, and they have to wiggle their way out. That was a genius idea, and I love the whole
They'll work
interaction
their way
between
out.
all of it. And Dooku, in particular, in this show, gets a lot of more love than he ever has, and he's shown as more of a conniving, real jerk of a leader who's not a yelling type, but he's just you do it and you do it now kind of person, and I'm gonna glare at you. And he's not as I love Christopher Lee, but Christopher Lee made him kind of seem, I don't know, not as Sith Lordy as maybe he could. He just kind of stood there a little bit. But this he actually has a lot of character in the show. If you weren't a big fan of Dooku, maybe in the originals, you'll see they show his power, and he was a lot stronger than people maybe the average fan gives him credit for. And this show makes you aware
Absolutely.
of that fact. And the separatist movement has a lot more in general role in this series, and they're not just running around like they are in the first movies, which kind of seemed rushed. This is a lot more tactical. That's one problem this show is hampered by is having to adhere to the movies. But as far as like who lives, who dies, and how things operate, because it does make for some weird scenarios sometimes. But other than that, yeah, I would say that pirate storyline that was the first one I was like, okay, this is pretty cool, and how they get out of that, and yeah, I don't know. What do you got to add?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love the idea because the pirate storyline happens about midway through the series, and we're very fortunate because Dave Filoni, George Lucas, because he was still working on these at the at Death Leader in season one. I think George didn't jump off until season three, potentially season four. So George and Filoni are working together, and what we've seen so far is very, very George, and we're getting a lot of good guys versus bad guys. We get the lightsaber fights, and Count Dooku, as to what you were saying, is he's a presence in this show. He is not just Count Dooku, former Jedi. He is also Darth Tyrannus. And we get those name drops in later seasons a little more, but he is absolutely a Sith Lord. He is absolutely apprentice to the most powerful being in the galaxy. He is absolutely a full-fledged duelist. He's not a well-respected actor being swapped out for stunt doubles every time you're not looking and covered up with CGI. No, they're able to fully flesh out this character. And so already at this point in the show, he is established as a Sith Lord. He is the enemy of Obi-Wan and Anakin. They're rivals. They interact regularly. And now so the pirate episode, what happens is the pirates end up kind of capturing Count Dooku. I don't remember exactly how they get a hold of him, but the
Neither.
pirates, they're like, "Hey, let's call the Jedi. Let them know we got the Separatist leader." So Anakin and Obi-Wan get dispatched. They show up, and the pirates are like, "You know what? I'm gonna ransom you guys too." And so now we've got all three, Count Dooku, leader of the Separatist army, and Anakin and Obi-Wan they're stuck in a jail cell together, and what they have to do is escape. And so now they have to work together, and you've got this just witty retort between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Count Dooku throughout their prison break. They're just little jabs, they're sarcastic as hell. They're it's just you got sassy Obi-Wan being just a menace to Dooku the like the entire episode, and he's trolling them, but they have to work together until Jar Jar shows up to save them because Jar Jar's the best character.
Yeah, well, actually, I could argue that Hondo's one of the best characters. He
I
was
would
really
also
well.
argue
We're not even gonna get the Jar Jar train yet. We're gonna hold that off. But Hondo is particular. He is a really good character. You would think that would just be a throwaway kind of like side villain that you would never need to put that much effort into, but he surprisingly is a very good character. I think he got a lot more traction than maybe you would think. Seems pretty popular among people.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I ever told you or not, one of the rides at Disney, um, it was one of the Millennium Falcon it might have been just the Millennium Falcon ride. You kinda get a brief there is an animatronic. There's a robot, really great one, that kinda gives you a brief, and he interacts with, like, characters on the screens and stuff. It's Hondo. Hondo
Mhm. Of
makes it to the Age of the Resistance. He
course
makes
he
it
does.
through the Empire.
Hondo
He's
lives
there.
forever.
He makes I like I know that he gets some episodes, some screen time in Rebels, which of course happens during the Imperial reign, but he makes it to the end because Galaxy's Edge is considered in continuity with the Star Wars universe. So yeah, Hondo makes it, and he was established in this first season of Clone Wars.
Um,
Um,
so
yeah,
we
go
can
ahead.
kind of segue into, we can kind of lump all this into one. The, I don't know if it was after this pirate thing, they did a prequel episode, which I thought was a weird that they threw it in when they did. I think they should have either led with this or I don't know why they just didn't do this earlier unless it was an afterthought. But they did the episode, the showing Slick betraying the clones, which I think was a very monumental episode with helping Ventress, showing that they can disobey and have their own personalities, which I think was not something people thought was possible. And that was a huge shift as far as any show moving forward because now we know that they are capable of more than just taking orders. And that also leads into the death of the clones as far as the show did a really good job of singling out small groups of clones because it's hard to feel bad for clones that all have the same face, but they would take out four or five and then you'd get follow them around for a little while, learn their names and see their different little personality traits and stuff, make you get attached to them, and then they would straight up murder three or four of them, and it was like, oh, but I liked him, and it was like, yeah, then you made you
Yeah.
feel compassion for them, which was, like you said earlier, the biggest part I think of the show was outside of maybe growing Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, their personalities going forward. I think that was the other major hit was giving clones an identity. And I think that was a lot of the and like not the maybe three quarters of this show, the season one was kind of focused on a lot of clone action heavy before it finished up into the blue shadow virus phase. But yeah, what do you got to add on the clones? Anything?
I have so much to add on the clones.
I figured you would.
I love why we have a podcast, right?
Right.
Uh,
Nobody can tell us no.
no, I no one's get your own show. Well, talk about what I want to talk about, damn it. No, I love the clones that so when you look at Star Wars, there are a lot of influences that impacted its creation and its aesthetic. And one of the main influences was obviously I say obviously, it is apparent that it is Nazi Germany and the way that the empire is reflected. And the separatist movement was always kind of like the prelude to that. Not necessarily like Germany World War One, but like what came before it, what led into it.
Hmm.
Um, One of the great things this show does for the clones in the Clone Wars is it adds that kind of it gives it the Band of Brothers vibe, which is really impressive that you're able to capture that with a kid's cartoon. But it you
Hmm.
really they take off their helmet often and frequent, and they have their own names, and that's one of my favorite episodes in the entire series happens in this. It's called Rookies, and that's where we meet, like, your main cast of the 501st. Um, but, like, Rex and Cody, Rex has got his own distinct shaved head hairstyle, and he wears he very distinctively wears his, his phase one armor on top of his commander outfit. Whereas, the other troopers, you see them upgrade later throughout the show. And so there are a lot of clones in this that get that individualized treatment. And you grow attached to them. They are clones, but like you love fives for being five. And when
Hmm.
fives meets his fate later in the season, you're sad he's gone. When, you meet Echo, when Echo meets his fate, you're sad he's gone. And it's not always what this series does so well, giving such a personal twist to these characters, creating these characters and making them significant. They do it in a short amount of time. There is one clone, I forgot which one it was, but he makes the sacrifice so Rex and Cody and them can get out. Well, Rex, Zach, we didn't even talk about Rex. This
Yeah.
show gives us Rex.
Yeah.
Yeah, season
Main
1 is
character
where
of the
he
whole
really comes
thing.
into.
Forgot about
Yeah,
him.
no, one of the most popular characters in all of Star Wars, again, given to us by this cartoon. Rex, for anyone that doesn't know, is Anakin's number one guy in the 501st Legion. Wherever Anakin and Ahsoka goes, Rex is right there, and he stays with them, and he stays loyal and true, and he makes it through Order 66. He makes it through the rebellion. He's at the Battle of Endor. They wrote him in to the Battle of Endor because he becomes such a significant character. And it's because they take the time to give you that individual just they world build. They make true characters, and you come to care for them. You come to love them. And when they die, it's not just a faceless death like it is for the droids, or when like a platoon with their helmets get knocked off, like you were saying. Uh, no, you feel it. It's impactful. It's so impressive that they're able to do that.
Well, I think I was going to do this a little bit later, but I think it fits in now better. In that same vein of thought, Ahsoka's major turn in the end of the show is a lot of it revolves around clone deaths and her role in X. Yeah, I guess just she was just young, didn't know what she was doing.
Yeah,
Without
that happens this season.
Yeah, she ends up costing the lives of a lot of clones that she was very close with, and she can't handle that grief very well, and it takes a toll that never she never really recovered from. And you see that shift, and I don't maybe that was the plan this entire season was to have her being annoying and then have this moment happen. Um, and if it was, it worked. If not, that was a great shift. Either way, it was what her character needed because from this point forward, she changes and it's noticeable. She's much more reserved. Um, she contemplates everything heavily before doing it, almost to the point of inactivity because she's afraid to repeat her mistakes. And you can even see that reflected in some of the later Ahsoka show when she's an adult. Even she still has, I think, some PTSD from those events where she's afraid to cause harm to people she cares about and almost refuses to do anything because that seems safer option. Um, but yeah, that was a major point in this episode. Was probably one of the most character development purposes happens in that, and I think it was a really good way to shape her. And Anakin in the same way. It's funny because he almost has a reverse uh
It's
maturity.
his downfall,
The way
right?
well, it's weird because in this season one, I was kind of rewatching some of it, just clips. He's actually, I think, more composed in season one than he is in the rest of the show. He's almost there's points where in later seasons he would have used his anger and would have lost control. And this season, there was a couple moments where similar situation happens, and Obi-Wan's just like, just chill out. And he's like, okay. And it was like, oh, he's actually a listening student right now and very with it. So it's kind of interesting to see that that's another theme you'll see throughout the rest of the seasons. This is slow. They don't do a that's what the show does best, I would say, if you are a big Star Wars person and haven't watched it. What the show does better than any other is character development. They don't do something for the sake of it like the new movies do. They will give you a reason as to why someone is the way they are, why they are so powerful. They'll show you some training. They'll show you there's a lot of reason behind it. That's one thing I think Dave Filoni is helped George with. I think George is great with the concepts, but Dave has refined things to a point where it makes sense. And I think that is evident in this show, especially. And I think they're the best tag team you could ask for when it comes to creating Star Wars content. But yeah, this is overall, it's a great thing. The Blue Shadow virus is the other big storyline in this, outside of the ending with Cad Bane. But Blue Shadow, there wasn't a whole lot of. I mean, it was a great villain, kind of a one-off, mad scientist, kind of cool, kind of novel. I wouldn't say there was anything overly surprising in that whole exchange. Just kind of a normal do your job. I don't know. Do you have anything to add on the Blue Shadow?
Shadow is interesting only because it showcases really how far the separatist movement was willing to go. Not even really the separatist movement, because surely the what the members of that movement were sold on was not the agenda of the Sith. It was very much the Republic has turned into something else. It was all manipulated, but the politics of um, that were always very plain, very clear on what they wanted. They're just cast so hard as the villains because they're willing to produce um, bioweapons to use on people. Now, it's different than later in the series where the clones are fighting, or Ahsoka and Anakin are, they're trying to get into some place to activate like a droid disabling thing or whatnot. We're talking about biological deaths in Star Wars manufactured by a side. That's it's in some ways it's not surprising because we opened up with let's blow up Alderaan with a space station. Uh, but
So,
like I don't know. It feels like okay, it's the difference in my opinion, the difference between nuking somebody and using like Sterex gas on somebody. It's such a crueler way almost to kill. And that the fact that one side was willing to go that far really casts the light on who the good guys and the bad guys were. And again,
yeah.
maybe the separatists weren't like necessarily aware, but like Dooku, the Sith Lord, Darth Tyrannus was aware. Um, you were talking about Anakin's development, and again, high praises for the show. Another thing it does really well is it fills in backspace, backstory, questions left unanswered. And one of those questions kind of left unanswered is how much does R2D2 really know by the time he meets Luke? And the answer is he knows everything because Anakin never erased his memory. Anakin liked having a buddy, and so he never wanted to get rid of it. But when R2D2 gets captured, everyone's like, "Chill out, Anakin. It's just a droid." But Anakin's like, "No, no, no. You guys don't get it. I uh I never deleted my browser history. We got to get that droid back." And everyone's like, "What? What do you mean? You He knows
Can I do a
everything?"
really weird this is gonna be a really short segue. I promise we're not gonna get on a tangent. Why wouldn't he, when he became Vader, put a more priority on finding R2, considering that was one of the only people that knew who he was and all of his browser history, but he didn't ever seem concerned with just finding his droid at all, considering the lengths he goes to in these shows to find his droid. You would think like because he even mentions in the novels, I don't want anybody to know who I am, and everybody that does, I will snuff them out. But he never seems concerned about the droid that seems to know everything about him, that could be telling everybody. He's just like, whatever. Even though he
Without getting without
I
getting
just had
too
that thought
much on
now.
a tangent, I think the explanation, could probably be, Vader very much wanted to kill all that was Anakin. He needed that victory over him. So I think maybe Vader was just like, that was Anakin's droid. I don't need it. I don't need him. I don't need to go look for R2. It's not gonna bring up any memories or anything. That's my what I think.
Well, I guess
He was
I
he
guess
was
he
just like,
assumed Obi-Wan had him, I suppose. Maybe that was just the
I don't
reasoning.
know, he did blow his brains out in episode 4, so maybe he did find R2. He's like, I know that droid." No, but yeah, yeah, just getting back to it, R2 knows it all because Anakin never ever erased his memories, and he falls into Separatist hands, and they gotta go rescue R2, which obviously that leads into the epic duel of the fates, R2 versus R3, 'cause, during this storyline is so ridiculous. R2 Anakin doesn't delete his browser history. R2 gets stolen with said browser history. Everyone's like, don't worry about the droid. It's just a droid." And Anakin's like, "No, really, we need to get it back. And here's why." And so now everyone's like, "Oh shit, we got to get that droid back." But apparently Jedi can't travel in space without an astromech. So they give him a replacement droid named R3,
I hated the
who ends
storyline.
up being
How?
R3 ends up being a double agent. And so
This was
R2
one of the
and
dumbest storylines.
R3 have a fight on top of like some chasm. It's like the crane that's over the city. That's
Hmm.
like they're fighting on top of the crane. So you get this, and they're just droids, so they're literally just kind of bumping into each other, and their heads are spinning, and they're screaming, and they got their attachment arms just like flailing around. It's the most ridiculous thing. And then at the whole end of it, Anakin still doesn't erase his browser history. R2 still knows everything. He's got all the battle plans. R2 is the most well-rounded astromech in the history of Star Wars
You'd think
because
he'd be like
nobody ever
corrupted
deleted
by
him.
that point, but no, he just keeps going
Oh,
until he
yeah.
shuts
I
down in
don't
the
know.
new movies, hibernation mode.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not going to talk
Which,
about that.
never got an explanation. I'm still mad about it. It makes no sense. It's plot
Retconned.
armor. Um, so, alright,
I mean, really,
talk
there's
about
the only thing left on my head on my to do list was. I mean, we kind of touched on it, but you have the introduction of Ventress, you have the Plo Koon and Kit Fisto, which you see more of them, but you also see some other Jedi that are new characters, which is I think probably one of the more interesting things too. Is just some random new people that they had to create for either disposable purposes or just new characters in general, and I think those were
Mhm.
pretty interesting in general.
Yeah, so much world building goes into it, and, so much they make characters just to get rid of them,
Mhm.
and I think that's so awesome because, like, because you can go back and the characters they made kind of existed before, and, like, you can pause it. Episode 3, you see, like, one dude just, like, walking in a hallway, and they're like Clone Wars is like, that's our guy. He's that's the one. That extra back there, can we pull his headshot? Does anybody remember what he actually looked like? He's a little fuzzy, you
Yeah, that
know?
is a great.
And build they built off of that, which was so,
Well, it's the only way to
beautifully
make
beautifully
tension because
done.
that's the problem. You have Kit Fisto, you have Plo Koon, who we know survive into Revenge of the Sith, so you don't have any tension there. But when you create characters that are new and intriguing, you don't know if they're going to live or die because the show has set a precedent that anybody could go if we want them to, and you'll never know. It's like Game of
Right.
Thrones, but light Game of Thrones.
Hold on, Zach. Yeah, I mean, we've even got brother and sister kissing action later. No, that's the movies. My bad. You said Game of Thrones. That's where we all go, right?
Well, maybe now that I'm thinking about this whole thing, it's might be Game of
Uh,
Thrones, Star
uh,
Wars edition.
man, I don't even remember what I was going to say now. That's great. What was I saying? No one remembers. That's okay.
Sorry, I'll just edit a thought bubble above your head, and I'll just leave it empty.
Yeah, boop, boop. Leave it
Can't compute.
fill in blank.
Error.
404. Make sure you include a little spinny wheel,
Update your
but
drivers.
it can only rotate.
Oh, also, I'm gonna put
It
in a
won't work. It
disclaimer
was
right
working
now.
last week.
Uh, what did Alex say? One's a war crime and one is acceptable. I don't know what he was talking about, but he said a good point, Kyle. Oh yeah, my
Wasn't looking
apology.
either.
If there's a terrible audio popping sound, we tried to fix it. I don't know how noticeable it is for you guys. I know I can hear it really well, but I also have some headset on, so maybe it's just me. But I'm gonna try to clean it up in post. So if it's really irritating you, Friday at 3 p.m., I'm gonna re-release this into a video form, so I can do some cleaning up probably in post. So, but yeah, we'll try to figure it out for next week. We're not sure. We tried everything. We don't know what's causing it. But yeah, do you have any closing thoughts? I think we hit it pretty well. We're gonna do season 2
I'm
next week.
I'm really excited for this whole we'll just call it an ongoing series.
Yeah, I'm glad we
And
broke this up into
the
parts. Oh
bet
my god, we would have been here for
the
6 hours.
yeah, that's pretty generous. No, this show has a lot to offer. It segues into a couple smaller spin-offs. This show is very near and dear to my heart, as I know it is Zach's, and most true, say true, most Star Wars
You're
fans
not a
in
true fan if
general
you
love
hate this
this
show.
show. Yeah, yeah,
If
you're
you
not
hate this show, get
real.
out of here.
You don't even really like Star Wars. No, no, it's a favorite for a lot of the fan base, uh, and we're gonna try to do it some justice because we love it, and the best, literally the best, is yet to come.
Yeah, and this was kind of a trial by fire. We'll get it cleaned up a little bit as far as how we want to do this. We weren't quite sure either, but I think we did some learning here. I think granted, it's not a perfect show. There's a lot of stupid episodes that really don't gain much anything from. We're gonna try to gloss over that stuff. We're gonna hit the big points, hit the character development, that sort of thing. So if you like this one, we'll do more of it, and we will expand. Well, we're gonna do it anyway, but come back next week.
Yeah, I mean,
Season 2. Do you know
choice.
where does season 2 pick up? Do you know off the top of your head?
Right after season 1.
I didn't know if there was any sort of time jumps.
Uh, I'm not positive if there is a time jump between these 2 seasons.
No, there
I
is one at
know
some point,
later
right?
on we do see there is later on, definitely in the later seasons, uh, Anakin's hair grows exponentially longer.
Oh, Alex was referring to the bioweapons. One's a war
Oh,
crime, one
yes.
is acceptable.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, but
thanks.
that's politics. That's real world.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We just like our space politics.
Look at that. We did good today. 48 minutes. I feel like we did a really good amount of stuff. We probably spent as much time troubleshooting the audio stuff. So, yeah. Yeah. Till next week, everybody. Thanks for watching. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Peace out.